Today we're going to build this ceiling fan in Blender. I don't have any blueprints or schematics to go by. I'm literally going to be eyeballing this from a fan that is in my office, so this should be interesting. This video serves to inform you how to solve these problems as the rest do, but also to let you know that I run through issues too. The only things I cut out were things that were very important in terms of, you know, not boring you to death, like stuff I was going back and forth trying to figure out. So I cut those things out, but everything else is good to go. All right, first of all, we're going to go in here and we're going to create a circle. I'm going to give it 128 vertices, so we have a lot of geometry to start working with to make our model a little bit more high detailed. I'm going to move it in position on the z-axis from the origin, because what we're building out to begin with is the mount that goes that connects to the ceiling on a ceiling fan. And like I said, keep in mind, guys, while you're watching this video, I'm literally eyeballing this. I wouldn't recommend it for paid work, but just to show you, there will be times when you have to do this. I'm going to create a collection to save my objects for the model in. Makes it easier to import those in other projects later. It's just a good habit. And that's good. I've got the collection. I'm going to go back in here in vertex edit mode. And from here, we're going to start extruding it and creating geometry, creating faces, and basically making the shape of this mount. So you'll see I'm just doing extrusions. I'm resizing some of the extrusions to span out the shapes. There's like a little hard beveled edge, and then it's going to taper down into not so much a point, but it's going to create like more of a rounded edge shape when we do subdivision surface modifier on it later. So just like I showed you in the other videos, the way I like to start working is I like to start with very basic building block shapes, because I know that once I put my modifiers in there, that's going to change everything. It's going to smooth everything out for us. And I'm kind of tapering this down so when I make the pole that comes down from this piece here that the fan actually sits on, it'll be the right diameter, or at least the right proportional diameter to the rest of it. So far this looks pretty decent. I'm checking the face orientation because I did the extrude faces along normals, and if you see red, that means it's backwards. So go to an edit mode and hit shift in, and Blender will recalculate normals, and now blue is what you see and blue is what you want. All right, I'm making sure my scale looks good. Okay, go back to front ortho mode, save the file. And now we're going to come back in here and start with the second piece here. So what I want to do is after I move the cursor to the selection of that open hole, I'm going to bring in a cylinder. And what I want to do is I want to roughly size it to this hole. I don't want it overlapping the hole, but I wanted there to be a little bit of gap. Because when we go and if you were to render this model out, you want to see a little bit of shadow, because that looks a little bit more like the real thing. Now we're not going to get super detailed and make rubber and all of the little pieces in between like you would see in the real fan, but I'm just doing this to illustrate how to build this out for you guys. And if you notice, I'm checking to make sure that my edges are lining up from the first piece to the second piece here. Something else just to be mindful of. And I'm going to rename this. And I'm going to add this object here, this pole, into the collection before I finish modeling it out. Okay, and I like to save my work because Blender is known to crash at times. Luckily, I hadn't had too many issues lately, but I got a little bit better hardware now than I used to have when I first started trying to learn Blender. So less crashes. So I'm going to go to X-ray mode. I'll select those bottom vertices, which will select all the vertices at the bottom, or I could have just used face selection mode and chose the bottom face. Either method works. I'm pulling it down with G. Notice I'm not extruding it. but I could have. But the reason why I'm not is because later I want to go in here and manually put in loop cuts. Okay, so there's the pole that hangs down from the mount. Save my file. And we're just going to keep building from here. The next piece I want to build is the housing for that the motor sits in for the ceiling fan. So I'm going to go down here, select that bottom face, move my 3D cursor down there. So when I bring in the next mesh primitive, it's going to put it in right there at that spot. And that way I don't have to go all over the viewport, find the shape, move it into place, and deal with all that. You'll see me do some of that in this video with certain parts of it, but I don't do it very often. Right now I'm going to create another circle, same verts, and what I want it to do is I want it to slightly fit over the top of this pole, because if you look at a real fan, that's how that motor piece fits slightly over the top of the edge of that pole, because the pole fits down into it and connects down into it. And the housing on the outside hides part of it. That's essentially what I'm trying to mimic here. So I'm extruding on the Z-axis, just kind of getting my bearings here, like how tall I want this base piece here to be. Like I said, I'm eyeballing all of this, so some of my measurements are totally off. As you'll see when I build this mount, it's not going to be proportional, but we'll fix it later. And I will say this too, the fan that I'm looking at, as I was building this, I was not looking at it straight on, I was looking at it up angle. So I was down below the fan, looking at it at angle, getting at distance, walking around it, because the fan was further up in the ceiling. So it wasn't perfect by any means, but that's okay, because like I said, I wanted to go ahead and record it as I did it and show you guys that these are the types of things at times that you'll go through as 3D artists, learning how to use Blender yourself. I'm still learning. I don't know everything. I'll be the first one to admit it. But what I have learned, I've learned very quickly, and you'll see we're going to make this model. So I just want to show you the process that I use. There may be some better ones out there. As a matter of fact, I'm sure that there are. But like anything, you get better at it the more you do it. So far on my channel, this is the most detailed model I've done yet, even though I've done more detailed models in real life for clients. But this was something I just had an idea to do one night. So I figured, hey, let's just tackle a ceiling fan. All right, so now we're down here making the motor piece. And at this point, I realized, oh, this thing's pretty huge. But yet again, I wanted to go ahead and model it out the way I thought it should be shaped, because we can resize it later. There was no need of backing up and starting over, in other words. And it may look like a weird shaped thing now, but keep in mind, before we're done, we're going to run a subdivision on this. And subdivision is going to not only round out most of these edges, it does that, but also it's going to size things down, because I think in one of my videos I likened it to, imagine having an open hand or a partially open hand, and that's kind of like us modeling here. And then when we apply a subdivision modifier on it, it's like going to shrink wrap around it a little bit, and tighten it down, and it's going to close the hand up a little bit more and round it off. I don't know if that's a great analogy, but that's kind of how I see it in my head. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and continue to model this out. Kind of looks like a spaceship, doesn't it? Or a roulette table. But I promise you, when we run sub-div on it, it won't look like that. And one thing you guys will get good at is, as you're modeling, you'll have a good understanding the more you do this what the thing is going to look like after applying subdivision on it. That was one of the things for me that was the hardest to visualize in the very beginning when I very first started learning Blender. All right, so what we're doing here is I'm tapering down a section because I'm going to put like the little end cap on the bottom of this. And if you see my little note up here, it's really too big. We're going to size it down. You'll see it. It's going to look great. And the cool thing about it is I'm not going to rebuild any of this. We're just going to take what we did because I know the shape is right, and we're just going to size it down. You'll see it's just going to be sized down later. I'm not going to show it because I just didn't want, the video's already long enough. I didn't want it to be even longer. All you have to do is select all the vertices in this piece here. That's why I'm building it piecewise. So there's a pole, there's a mount, there's a motor. So all you got to do is select everything in the motor and basically just size it down. Just hit S and then proportionally scale it. You might have to size it on the Z-axis a little bit too, because this one might have ended up a little bit too tall. So I think I just briefly scaled it on Z as well. But make sure that if you do that you select everything, including the piece here on the inside, because you see that what I'm doing now is I am yet again extruding along the normals, and I went ahead and just recalculated the normals to make sure everything was good. And as you can see, everything's blue. The little red you see around the edges is literally the red outline, which on my screen is more of a fuchsia color or hot pink, not red that you see from Blender from when you got bad normals. All right, so I'm getting ready to select some faces in here because this is where I want to put the vents. There are vents on these fans that you always see, and they look different depending on what model of fan you have, that essentially allow air to flow into the inside this housing into the motor to keep the motor from overheating as it's turning your fan blades. So I'm going to mimic, mine's pretty simple when you look at it. And I looked at it, I was like, oh, it's pretty simple to model this. So I'm selecting all these faces. I did a checkered deselect. I did an inset, and basically what I'm doing right now is I'm deflating it using the deflate tool to kind of suck that in. If you wanted to, you could have just deleted those faces, and it would have just, when you rendered this with lighting, it would appear black. But that's up to you. Going down here now, I'm selecting this edge here, and I am moving my 3D cursor because now I'm going to put the end cap. I'm going to get ready to model it. So yet again, create another circle. You see, we're just repeating patterns. 128 verts. Go in the bottom ortho, and all I want to do is just scale this down so it roughly covers that hole, maybe a little bit wider than that hole, because I don't want to see the gap in this piece. And then notice it's tucked up to the bottom of the motor, and then I start extruding on the Z-axis. I'm bringing it down, and I'm essentially eyeballing the shape of this. And this piece here is where our fan blades are going to connect. Normals look good. And what we want to do, so we don't have to model every fan blade. The fan that I have has 5 blades on it. I don't want to have to model every single blade 5 times, or model it once and then create a duplicate instance of it manually. So I'm going to show you a little trick that might come in handy, and at some point you will be doing this in your modeling. So I've got a whole circle here that I extruded up, put a little bit of thickness on it. And what I want to do is I really only need 1/4 of it. Because 4 quarters will make the whole. And we'll watch. I'm going to go in here, select these verts. I'm in X-ray mode. Let's delete half of it to start with, half of the faces or the verts. And then I'm going to go in here and get rid of the other half. which will leave me with 1/4. Okay. And before I get too ahead of myself, I'm going to go ahead and select part of this 1/4, and I'm going to extrude out the piece of the fan, the metal piece that has the screws in it that actually holds the blade on it. I'm going to extrude what looks like that out first. I'm just arbitrarily picking some faces. I'm not getting too detailed with it. I could have, but it would have lengthened the video probably by another 15-20 minutes. I'm in ortho mode and hitting the number 4 and the number 6 on the numpad to kind of pivot around the ortho view. So this piece right here is like the little metal piece you see on the fans that have the screws in it that actually hold the blade to this piece here. And I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. I'm not over-engineering the design of this by any means. And like I said in the beginning of the video, the point is to show you how to problem solve. As we continue to have more and more videos on this channel, I'll start getting doing a lot more details and being a lot more picky about, choices that I make and that sort of thing. Once you guys get to a good point where you're confident in your modeling, then I'll show you how to get a lot more drill down in detail with things. And you see all I'm doing is selecting some faces here. I'll select them on top and the bottom. And essentially all I'm going to do is extrude them just to give it a shape. I'm not trying to, like I said, not trying to go super high definition here. So you'll see we're doing a lot of the same stuff modeling this. We're creating circles with 120 vertices. We're extruding, we're sizing. We're extruding along the normals. There'll be times when we'll use a deflate, which you can kind of look at it like extruding along normals. And we'll be pivoting things around the 3D cursor. We'll be moving the 3D cursor to figure out where our next shape is going to go, that sort of thing. A lot of the same kinds of stuff. So right here, what I want to do is I want to figure out how do I take this quarter piece and then make a whole piece and basically programmatically duplicate this thing across all of the 4 pieces. So what I'm doing is I'm going in, I created the shape, I created a displace modifier, I'm adding in an empty specifically for this piece here, and I created an array modifier. My fan has 5 blades on it, so the array modifier is going to cover us for the 5 blades. I had an object offset. I want to pick the new empty that I selected, and what I want to do is I want to select the empty, and I'm going to rotate it on the Z-axis and watch and see what happens. There you go, we got our 5 blades. This is a very common technique. And that way, if I make a change, the benefit of this is if I make a change to that original mesh, that quarter piece that we were working on, it'll duplicate the changes to all of the other 4 automatically. So they'll be symmetric. You can guarantee everything's exactly the same. You'll see us do that here in a second with the blades. Now notice my little note here. These first blades I made were kind of garbage, but I do get to show you one new thing I've never showed before, and that's the boolean modifier. But later I'm going to show you a better way of doing the blades. It's much easier. I thought this was a good idea at the time, but I ended up not liking it, so I ended up doing it differently. But I'll explain it nonetheless. So I selected those faces, moved the 3D cursor to the edge of those faces, and essentially what I'm going to do is throw in a plane. The problem with this is I'm having to work too hard to make sure it's straight. And a plane is really, the way we're going to do it is nothing more than a cube. And really what I could have done is just extended what I already had, and it would have been, I could have extruded it perfectly across its local normal axes. But instead, I go in here and try to make something totally different and trying to line it up. Anyway, like I said, it made sense at the time, but looking back at it, it didn't make any sense. So, but it just goes to show you that, this is pretty common. You think you got a good idea, you try it and it doesn't work, and you need to figure out a better way of doing it. So essentially what I'm trying to do here is I'm taking this plane, I'm trying to size it to roughly what these blades look like, but basically creating the primitive shape. Because since it's a plane, I'm going to have to add some depth, some geometry depth to it, using either solidify modifier or extruding it. And then on top of that, later I'm going to have to fix the edges, and then going to have to use subdivision, just so it looks right. But it's not terrible. It's not a great solution, but it ended up not being terrible. But I don't want to teach you guys how to do stuff this way. So basically, I'm just kind of scaling it out. This would be a technique similar to making the blade of a sword, to be honest with you. Because that's kind of what I had in mind when I was doing it. You'll see a lot of times I like to work in orthographic view because everything is just straight. I can guarantee it's going to be straight. And my vertices and edges and faces are limited in terms of like what axis they can move on. I mean, this would work, but it's sloppy. So look at all the time I wasted just trying to get this shape. And when we come back later and you see the solution I ended up using for the blades, you'll probably agree with me. So now I'm trying to give it depth, so I'm extruding along the normals again. Now I'm having to go in here and check face orientation. Luckily, it's fine. And in order to get this to copy over with the displace and erase setup we did to make this whole piece a whole circle again, I've got to figure out how to connect that fan blade back to the mount, back to the bracket piece. It's touching right here. And my solution at the time was using the boolean modifier and selecting the union option. The union basically takes two geometric shapes and joins them together, but it's non-destructive. Versus me selecting this little mountain piece here, or this bracket piece, I should call it, and then the blade, and then hitting Control or Command J to literally tie the geometry together. I didn't want to do that in case I wanted to move something around. I mean, I could have done it, but didn't want to do it that way. But my point is, I'm wasting a lot of time and wasting a lot of resource and brain power trying to figure this out. But I wanted to show it to you guys regardless. So here's where I select the two of them together. You can tell I'm sitting here trying to figure out, I don't know about this, but I'm kind of married to it now. So now I'm going in with the Boolean and see it's set by default as difference. I'm changing the stack here, the modifier stack, which can get you in trouble. Be mindful of the modifier stack and what order things are coming in, because sometimes you could be doing something right. It's just that you don't have it in the right order, and then crazy stuff starts happening to your models. You see this very commonly with bevels and subdivision. And the reason why that blade looks weird, that one blade, is I've got the original blade overlaying the union or connected version of it, instance version of it. It won't render that way. It just looks that way in the viewport. All right, so now I re-enabled my displacement modifier and all that stuff. So you see all these blades here. They're direct copies, exact copies of that original one we just created there. So now I'm coming down here and I'm finishing off this this cap plate that goes on the bottom of the fan. From here, we're gonna have two chains that come down from it. One chain works the lights on a real fan. The other chain works the fan speed. And notice I'm making sure that all the vertices, all these circles are exactly the same, because if I wanted to come back in here later and tie that geometry together, it makes it very, very easy. It'd be very clean. Also, if you think about subdivision, when I apply it, I know that my geometry is exactly the same in terms of the number of edges. Well, I won't say edges, but vertices. So right now I'm just, yet again, doing the same thing I've done before. Extrusion, size, extrusion, size, and just kind of getting this base plate's shape down as best I can. And I'm literally turning around in a chair as I'm building this, looking up at a fan behind me. And I want to end this with a grid fill. You don't have to do this, but it looks a little bit neater when you change the offset and get it lined up. Okay. Now, one thing on the fan that I'm looking at, the lights, there are 3 lights that are connected to this fan. And those 3 lights are connected to this end cap piece here. They're physically attached to it. So what we have to do next is figure out how we want to do these lights. All right, so I think what I'm going to do here is I want to create the lights as a separate object away from the fan, a little bit away from the fan, and then figure out how I want to connect it to that end piece down there. So create a new circle, yet again 128 vertices. Going to size it down. And I'm just zooming in just so my visual focus is just on building this light out. And yet again, we're extruding. Extruding. So this piece that you see me building now is the metal piece that comes off of the end cap. And while I'm here building this piece, I will also, off the same geometry, will build the glass bulb shade that comes off of it as well. So there's that little metal piece here. And notice it doesn't have the little pole that connects to it for the wiring. The wiring goes through that. Hadn't done that yet. And I didn't do it yet on purpose because I don't yet know if I want to connect this from the end cap piece or if I want to connect it by extruding it off of this piece here onto the end cap piece. So right now I'm just holding off and not doing that part. What I'm doing now is coming here, I'm going to give this a little thickness. I want to check my normals, and they are reverse. So I'm going to come in edit mode, select everything, and hit shift in. Now the normals have been recalculated and they're looking good. And what I want to do now is start working on the bulb, which on my lamp is made of like a frosted glass. So I'm going to select this edge loop here. I'm going to move the cursor down here so that when I stick my next circle in here, it drops it right there. Another 128 vertices circle. Gonna scale it down. I want it to be a little smaller than this opening because I want to recess it up in there just a hair. About like that. And from here, I'm going to extrude it down and size it out, extrude down, and basically make the primitive shape of that bulb shape. Like I said, all I'm doing is the same stuff. Extrusion, sizing, extrusion, sizing. And yet again, you'll see I'll select everything here in a minute and give it some thickness. We could run the solidify modifier. That would work. I mean, it's non-destructive, which is nice. But I kind of know going into this how thick I want this stuff to be, so I don't extruding along normals is just faster for me. I'm okay with committing to it. And normals are good, as they should be, because we had calculated the normals on the previous part. And then I'm going to join this geo together by hitting Control J on the Mac or Command J on the PC. It basically takes the geometry from those two separate objects and makes it one object. So now I'm renaming it. I'm going to throw it in my collection. And we're getting ready to move this back up towards the fan. If I can get one light right, then the other two will be easy. And you'll see the solution I come up with to do that. It'll be a different method than we use for the fan blades. But it's just another way of doing kind of the same thing. So I'm just kind of getting the angle of the light right. Basically the way I see it on the real fan. I'm scaling the size down, which honestly I could have left the light the size it was, and it probably would have been more accurate. But in this version here, I'm looking at the fan blades, and I'm trying to scale it proportionate to the fan blades because I knew at this time that the motor piece up there was just still too big. Which, looking at the final result, I think this was probably a good decision to scale it. And you guys start doing like paid work. That's why I think it was one of my last videos, the one where I did the weights, the dumbbell weights. You saw that I actually used real measurements. It's very important because it keeps you from having this issue when things are like not proportioned well, and it throws your whole model off. And now you run around trying to figure out what's wrong and trying to fix everything, and then it screws things up. And it costs time. I'll tell you what I ended up doing. You'll see a version here where you'll see the pole coming off the geometry. That made sense when I first did it, but I very quickly remembered, oh, well, my light's got 128 vertices, and this circle here that I made off of this cap here does not. So then that didn't work. So I ended up making a hole or a circle. I got to fill it with a grid fill, just so I don't have an open hole there in my geometry. And what I decided to do is go back to the lampshade piece, and you'll see the little note here. And I ended up making the pole coming off, extruding off of it, and just stuck it on to the side of the cap. Now, how do we get 3 of these on here? I'm going to use old trusty spin tool. So I selected the one in edit mode, selected the spin option, and now I'm taking the other 2 on the y-axis and just kind of scaling them out so they're proportionate to the one that's selected. I'm just kind of tweaking it here. And that's essentially what the fan looks like, minus that giant motor. I mean, like I said, the motor's not that big, but you'll see here pretty soon that after I fixed it, and it'll look a lot better. But the lights look spot on. I could have modeled light bulbs, but I didn't see the point for the tutorial. All right, saving my file. Now zoom out and let's look at it. Look at the whole thing. Now you guys can really see how giant that motor piece is. But everything above it and everything below it looks good. All right, so right here, I'm selecting some faces on the bottom of the plate, and I'm creating a circle because from here, this is gonna be a little piece that comes down that your chain comes from. Well, it's the first chain. We're gonna make 2 of these. And I'm just insetting this in, and I'm extruding it back up in there because I want the chain to look like it's coming from from up inside that little opening there. I'm just selecting this edge right here around this grid field because I want to put a small bevel on it, so when we run subdiv, we can restrict the curving here. And I'm going to also do it on these outer edges and where it connects to the body of the end cap here. And just to keep the geo nice, I'm going to run some support edges inside and outside of this thing. All right. So how do we make this chain? And my chain looks like a bunch of little metal spheres that are connected together, going down like with a rope in between them. But the rope is not very visible. It just looks like a bunch of little metal spheres, like little balls. So I want to mimic something fairly easy that is similar to that here in a second. But right now, what I'm doing is I'm creating my second little opening here. So I'm going on the opposite side of the cap here, and I'm creating another circle. I'm going to extrude it out like I did one at the bottom after doing an insert. And I'm literally going to copy the same technique I did for the one on the bottom. This was just literally on the side. And I'm just kind of eyeballing the sizing and the scaling of everything just to make sure it looks fairly accurate. I'm going to insert these faces here, and then I'm going to extrude it back in. Because from here, the chain on the side is going to come out on the side, and it's going to drop straight down. That's how I want to tackle this. Yet again, I'm going to do select these edge loops and do like a little bevel. Because like I said, when we do subdivision, I want to restrict its ability to curve those edges so that this piece here keeps its shape. It doesn't look like a weird ball or You know, some weird shape that subdivision did to it. Putting some support loops here to kind of reinforce the shape and reinforce the geometry. Okay. Now that's done, let's figure this whole chain thing out. So look it up in there. I'm going to start with this guy here. So I'm going to zoom in, and the first thing I think I want to do is I want to go to edit mode, and I want to select edge loop that's up in there a little bit. Going to move the cursor there because when I bring in a UV sphere, which is going to represent one of the balls, I want to size it down and put it right on the inside of that opening there. And if you guys notice, I'm fairly good at the habit of making scale changes to things in edit mode. If you always work like that in edit mode, you don't have to worry about manually having to go back in there and resetting the scale or the rotation. That's just a little tip. And right now, all I'm trying to do is just make sure it's fairly centered in there. This is also a technique similar that you use to make eyeballs, put eyeballs inside of characters' heads in modeling. Take a UV sphere, you'll have like an opening made for, like in the skull or in a head or something. I did one with a teddy bear one time. That was from a tutorial I watched. That was actually really good. Yan Sculpts is the guy's name who did the tutorial. I actually paid for the tutorial. It's excellent tutorial. But this is essentially what he did to put the eyeballs in there. So if you start thinking about modeling and problem solving in Blender, you'll find out one technique for, say, like a hard surface model, like what we're doing here, can be used in solving problems for many other things that you'd model as well. All right, so what I'm doing now is I'm creating a curve, but instead of me just throwing a Bezier curve in here, I wanted to do a single point. If for whatever reason you go into Blender and don't see that, you have to go into the preferences and go into the add-ons, and you need to enable the extra curves, and it will be in there. I always do the extra curves, the extra meshes, or mesh objects, I think is the way they got it labeled. I turn all that on because I find myself using a lot of that stuff. But I'm just starting with a single curve vertices, and then I'm extruding it down. And the way I have my Blender set up, you'll see the little arrows, and you have to either turn that on in the menu up at the upper right of the screen. And I made mine a little bit larger so I can see directionally where my curve is going. So when you see me go back into edit mode for that curve, you'll see those little arrows in there, and that's what that is. I'm essentially figuring out how long I want this chain to be. I'm going to take the single ball, I'm going to create an array, and I'm going to run it along the length of that curve. So first I'm going to run my curve modifier. I'm selecting the curve chain 001 is what I named it, and now I'm going to bring in an array modifier. And I want to do an offset on the z-axis, but as you see, nothing's happening yet other than it shooting in the opposite direction. And yet again, this goes back to what I was talking about with the order of our modifiers. They have to be in a particular order. And if you look at curve, it shows deform axis on X. I need to change that to Z. And now we have the array first, curve second, and deform axis on Z, and now everything looks good. So far, this is non-destructive. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Hope you guys are happy with it. All right, so now we're gonna go and tackle the side one. So this one's gonna be a little bit different. Same technique, but slightly different. This one needs to come out from the side of the hole, and then because of gravity, it needs to drop straight down. So I'm creating another UV sphere, and yet again, I'm gonna size it to the hole. This sphere is going to be a little bit smaller, which my chain, I noticed the side chain was slightly smaller than the chain that came from the center. Mine's not perfect, but it's decent enough for eyeballing work. I'm just trying to make sure this UV sphere primarily covers the hole. And like I said, the hole is an angled shape, but when we run subdivision on it, it's going to look like a circle. So keep that in mind, and it's going to shrink it down just a little bit. So be mindful of that when you're sizing your spheres here. Okay, I'm renaming it, moving it in the collection. I'm going to come here now and also create another curve, and this will be curve chain 002, so I know which curve goes with what set of spheres. And yet again, I'm doing the same trick as before. I'm using a single point. And I extruded it out, and then I came all the way down. And the reason why I came out a little bit more than what you might think I probably should is I'm trying to be mindful of the diameter of the sphere, so I don't get any weird crunching or bunching of one sphere on top of another one when I run these modifiers. And I think I got the sizing about where I want it. But like I said, this is non-destructive, so if the curve isn't long enough, we can go back in there and make it longer without redoing any of this work. We're just tweaking it at that point. I could have gone in and beveled the curve and made it a lot smoother, but this is going to be so small in the scale of everything else when modeling this out that it's not really going to matter a whole lot. Okay, so now I'm going to run my array modifier, and I'm just going to eyeball the number of spheres that we need here. And then, of course, like before, we got to get the order right. So now we got array first, curve second. Deform axis is Z because we want it to drop straight down. And I'm going to add a few more spheres here in the array. All right, so what I want to do here is I want to bring in another circle. I'm going to scale it on Z. What this piece is going to be is the little metal piece on the end that is basically just a weight. It's like a weight for the chain. And I'm just kind of scaling it down just to make sure the proportion of it is relatively similar to what I actually have. So I'm going to extrude it out on Y. You'll see a lot of times, if you watch my videos, I typically start modeling in the front orthographic view, because that helps me later when I'm making stuff like this keep track of what axis I'm on, and I can very quickly go to another orthographic view and know that my model is directly aligned on at least one of those orthographic views, whether it be the top one, the bottom, the left or right, or the front and back. I found out for me that just helps me keep my orientation when I'm working and building stuff in 3D. Okay, so I'm doing some edge loops here. So when we run subdiv, like I said before, it will restrict the curving at this section here. So to keep its shape, in other words. And then I'm going to go in here and do the same thing for these two as well. Actually, I tried to run a grid fill here for some reason. It didn't work. And I think it's because the edges here is already filled in. So instead of what I decided to do is just to keep from burning too much time trying to fix that, I'm just going to run bridge edge loops in here. And I'm going to create a nice little shape like so. And because we did that, now I've got to come in here and bevel these out with some little bevel edges here. So subdiv is happy. But instead I chose to do the I'm doing some edge loops. I'm going to run a crease. All right, I'm running level 2 subdivision on this shade smooth on the chain and the weight, and now I got to go up here and put another weight on the second chain. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to instance this one by hitting Alt D, not Shift D. And the instance is basically like a ghost copy of the original thing. It doesn't use any more memory, versus Shift D is a duplicate. It's a separate object in memory, which is adding to your scene's memory consumption. But also, if you change one, it does not affect the other. However, when you hit Alt D in instance, if I make a change to one of these, it immediately in real time will change the other one. And given that these weights are exactly the same, it just makes more sense to instance it versus duplicate it. So I'm just kind of getting it in place right here because I didn't use my 3D cursor to do it. And yet again, running subdiv. And I'm also going to parent the weight to the chain. So if I later on come in here and move one of these things, they're connected. I could have actually joined the geometry, but I did not want to do that because then I would have had to go in and make sure that the vertices all lined up, and I wouldn't have like duplicate vertices or overlapping geometry or anything like that. So parenting for this use case is good enough. And that way I don't have to worry about that kind of thing. So now we're going to move our way back up. We're done with the chains. And if you see, we still have those old fan blades, but I'm slowly coming back up here and tackling to make sure that subdivision modifier looks good. And we got shade smoothing put on various things. But before we get to doing that, I need to go in here for all of these primitive shapes I made, like the cap here. We did bevels on the openings, but I didn't do bevels on the rest of it. So I'm kind of coming back in here and tying up loose ends. I'm doing like little bevels on the main piece of this cap now. Normally I would have run a lot more edge loops in here, but I'm only running like level 2 subdivision. Normally I don't leave such elongated faces. If you really want to get really good at modeling, don't do what I'm doing right now. You've seen other videos I've done where I did not do that. I didn't leave such elongated faces. Typically what you want to do is you want to make sure that the geometry is like the faces in your geometry are almost square as best they can be. And what I mean by that is like the same distance on each edge, the same length on each edge, just say to make a perfect square. All right. So I'm just checking that. So now here you'll see the rework of the fan blades. And also, if you notice, the motor section is much smaller too. So I fixed it offline. So I'm going to show you a little bit better way of doing this. So basically what I decided to do is I went back in here in the bracket piece. I wanted to pick some faces off the edge of that, and I'm just going to extend them out. And if you notice, since we have all the modifiers and stuff still applied, when I make the change to the one, you see it in real time, it's changing all the others. So I extruded it out, and now what I'm doing is those same selected faces, I'm just bringing them down on the Z-axis and getting them kind of shorter together on each other. And then I'm going to give it a little bit of a twist like you'd see in a real fan blade, so it like kind of scoops the air, like so. Nothing fancy, but these look a lot better than before. And I could have done edge loops on them. If you were doing a very polished version of this, I would suggest you do edge loops on these. So yet again, I'm coming back in here. I'm just doing a little bit of tidy work on bevels. I'm just kind of checking to see how subdivision looks on it as it is right now, and seeing where I need to put bevels in it, bevels or creases. So see, it looked a little flat and mushy up at the top, so I'm going to put some nice bevels here to restrict it. Looking at it again. So I'm just kind of taking my time with it. Also, I noticed here where the little vents are. Like I said, you'd probably be better off selecting these faces and deleting them. I just chose to leave them there, but what I'm doing is I'm putting a crease on the edges here. I don't want them to look like rectangles. I want them to have that kind of smooth bend, because that's what the fan looks like. But I'm only creasing the part down at the bottom where that bottom face is, as you can see. I intentionally didn't crease the rest of it. I could have run some side edge loops in these and cleaned those up a little bit, but like I said, for time's sake, I just didn't. On some of these video here, you'll see the old fan blades, but this is one area where I had to trim it. I just want to show you guys. I want to show you guys all the edge looping and smooth shading and subdivision I did. So this part of the video right here was before I fixed the fan blades, but you'll see as we move along, it's still in the correct order. I'm moving my way up, doing tweak work. putting bevels and creases on things that need it. But you'll see the correct fan blades again here in a second. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I'm not trying to make everything too sharp because it doesn't look too sharp in real life. Always important, these edges right here where you've got thickness, you want to put a little bit of edge on that, and that'll retain that nice shape when you smooth it out. See, when I run sub-diff, I lose that total edge. Right, you'll see me select it here in a second. But you saw where I lost that edge right down there where it starts tapering down. You don't even see that there at all. So I think what I'm going to do to that piece there is just crease it. Yep, see how that edge just disappeared? So let's go in here and select it. And instead of beveling it, because I don't really want to bevel it, let's just crease it. And what a creasing can do is it'll keep a nice edge on it. I wouldn't say it's chamfered, I just say it's kind of like it takes the pixels, it restricts them, and it makes like a nice fold. Here we go. We got the blades, which like I said, they could do, we got subdivision on them, so that's adding the geometry, but I could have manually put some nice edge loops in here, would have tightened it up a little bit better, but it still looks good, but we're done. There's your video.